and welcome to Crowain Manor. Wherever you are, and whatever kind of night it's been, you've come to the right place to slow down. Let the world go quiet for a while. Out here, none of it needs your attention. Many of you return to these rooms night after night, and I'm grateful for that. There's a reason you keep coming back. The stories kept inside these walls aren't quite like the ones you'll hear anywhere else. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. And if these stories stay with you, a like and a subscribe help more than you know. Now get comfortable, breathe slow, and let's open the door together. One time, I rolled my Nissan Cube into the side of a mountain, and to this day, I still do not fully understand how I walked away from it. It was one of those moments where everything happens fast, but inside your head, it feels like time slows down so much that you can notice tiny details you would normally miss. I have seen scenes like that in movies and on TV, where a car flips and the character suddenly experiences everything in slow motion, but I never thought that was something that actually happened in real life. Then, it happened to me. And I realized that when your brain thinks you are about to die, it does strange things with time. It was early in the morning, still dark outside, and I was driving on a winding two-lane road along the side of a mountain. Those roads are already stressful when the sun is up, but in the dark they feel like something else completely. The curves come at you one after another, and there is not much room for mistakes. On one side, there is the mountain itself, hard and close. On the other side, there is the kind of drop that makes you very aware of how small your car is. The road bends and twists like it was carved into the mountain by someone who did not care whether people felt safe driving it. I was in my Nissan Cube, which is not exactly the kind of car that makes you feel powerful or protected. It is boxy, small, and a little ridiculous looking, but it was my car. I had both hands on the steering wheel, driving carefully, trying to stay alert. I was not drunk. I want to make that clear because anytime someone hears about a crash like this, their mind goes there first. I am allergic to alcohol, so I definitely was not drinking. I was not out partying. I was not being reckless on purpose. It was just early, dark, and I was on a mountain road, which already felt like enough danger by itself. And to make it even better, I am an Asian woman driving alone in the dark on a narrow mountain road. I joke about that now because sometimes humor is the only way to talk about something that scared the life out of you. In my mind, that already felt like 2 strikes against me. Early morning, dark road, mountain curves, alone in a little Nissan Cube. It was not exactly the kind of situation where you feel like the universe is on your side. I do not remember the exact second everything went wrong as clearly as I remember what came after it. That is one of the strange things about an accident. You remember the impact. You remember the fear. You remember what your body did. But the cause can become blurry, like your mind refuses to replay the part where control was lost. One moment I was driving, and the next moment, everything changed. The car hit, rolled, and somehow began moving in a way cars are never supposed to move. From the first impact to the rolling, to the moment the car finally landed upright again, it all felt unreal. It was not just fast chaos, even though I know it must have happened quickly. To me, it felt stretched out, almost like I had been pulled out of normal time. The car was rolling, but my thoughts were oddly clear in between the panic. There were sounds everywhere, metal twisting, glass cracking, the deep, violent thud of the car hitting the road or the mountain, things inside the car flying around. And yet at the same time, there was this strange quiet inside my head, like my brain had turned down the volume of the world just enough for me to understand that I might not survive. At some point during the rolling, I forced myself to peek. I did not open both eyes. I could not. I only had the courage to open one eye, just barely, because some part of me wanted to know what was happening, even while another part of me did not want to see my own death coming. What I saw made no sense at first. The world outside was spinning and flashing past the windows in pieces. Darkness, road, mountain, sky, glass, metal, shadows. It looked like I was inside a bottom load dryer, staring out through the round glass door while everything tumbled around me. That is the closest way I can describe it. It did not look like I was in a car anymore. It looked like I had been thrown inside some giant machine, and the whole world was spinning around me. In that moment, I became completely convinced that I was going off the cliff. I thought the car was nosediving off the side of the mountain. I thought I had already left the road and was falling into open space. I could not tell where the road was anymore. I could not tell which direction was up. I could not tell if the next impact would be with pavement, rock, trees, or the bottom of a cliff. My mind filled in the worst possible answer. I thought, this is it. I am going over. I am going to die. There was no time to make a plan. There was no time to think about steering out of it or hitting the brakes or doing anything useful. I was just inside the car, being thrown around by the force of the crash, still gripping the steering wheel like my hands were locked to it. I had both hands in that perfect 10 and 2 position like I was taking a driving test, which is ridiculous when I think about it now. My car was rolling into a mountain, and there I was, still holding the wheel properly like some instructor was going to grade me after. But at the time, nothing felt funny. I really believed death was right there. It is strange what comes into your mind when you think you are about to die. It is not always a long, dramatic movie montage of your whole life. For me, it was simple and heartbreaking. I thought about my cat. I thought about my mom. I said goodbye to them in my mind because I truly believed I was leaving this world right then. I did not have time to call anyone. I did not have time to send a message. I did not have time to say anything properly. So I said it silently, inside myself, with whatever love and fear I had in that second. I accepted my fate, or at least I thought I did. I remember crying out loud, Jesus, here I cometh. I know that sounds dramatic, and it also sounds a little ridiculous now, but in the moment, it was completely real. It came out of me because I thought I was on my way out. I thought the next thing I was going to see was the afterlife, or nothing or whatever comes when everything ends. I was terrified, but there was also this strange surrender in it, like I had reached the point where fighting was useless, and all I could do was announce my arrival. And then, apparently, Jesus said, hell no, bitch, not today, because I did not die. Somehow, after all that rolling and noise and spinning, the car landed upright. Not upside down. Not crushed flat. Not over the side of the mountain. Upright in the middle of that windy 2-lane road on the side of the mountain. Alone, in the dark. Still alive. Still in the driver's seat. Still gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2 like the most traumatized student driver in history. For a moment, I just sat there. I was in shock. Real shock. Not the way people casually say they are shocked when something surprises them. I mean the kind where your mind and body do not know what to do next. My hands were still wrapped around the steering wheel. My body felt frozen. My heart was pounding, but everything else felt strangely numb. I was trying to understand how I was still alive. A second earlier, I had been sure I was diving off a mountain and saying goodbye to my cat and my mom. Now I was sitting upright on the road as if the universe had slammed me back into place and said, "Not yet." The car was still. The rolling had stopped. The awful noise had ended. The world outside was dark and quiet again, but it was not the same quiet as before. It was the silence after chaos, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. I could feel my breathing, fast and uneven. I could feel my body starting to check itself for pain. Was I hurt? Was I bleeding? Was anything broken? At first, I could not even tell. Adrenaline does that. It fills you so completely that your body becomes both too alive and strangely distant at the same time. I looked around as much as I could. The road was still there. The mountain was still there. I was not at the bottom of a cliff. I had not gone over the edge. Somehow, the car had rolled and landed back on its wheels. I had crashed hard enough to feel like I had entered a washing machine from hell, but I was still sitting upright on the road. The absurdity of that hit me almost as hard as the fear. I had been rejected by God. That is how it felt in the most ridiculous way. I had basically announced, "Jesus, here I come." And the answer had been, "Nope, return to sender." There I was, still alive, still alone, still in my little Nissan Cube, forced to deal with the aftermath instead of floating peacefully into heaven, or whatever I had expected in that split second of surrender. I can laugh about that now, but at the time it was not really laughter. It was more like hysteria sitting quietly in my chest, waiting for me to fall apart. I kept thinking about how close it felt. Not close in the way people say, "Wow, that could have been bad." I mean close like I had mentally stepped over the line between life and death and then been shoved back. I had said my goodbyes. I had accepted that I was done. Then suddenly, I was not done. That is a very strange thing for your brain to process. Part of you is grateful, obviously. Another part of you is confused because it had already prepared for the end. It is like your mind packed a bag for death and then had to unpack it while sitting in a wrecked car. I do not know how long I sat there, gripping the wheel. It might have been seconds, or it might have been longer. Time was still not working normally. The whole accident had felt slow, and the moments after it felt stretched, too. I remember being aware of the road around me, aware that another car could come around one of those curves and not expect to find me sitting there. That thought eventually pushed through the shock. I was still in danger, even though the crash itself was over. I was on a winding mountain road in the dark, and my car had just rolled. I needed to move, or at least figure out what to do. But before I could think clearly, the fear came in waves. It was not one clean feeling. It was fear, disbelief, relief, confusion, and a weird kind of embarrassment, all mixed together. I kept replaying the image of looking out through that one barely opened eye and seeing the world tumble like the inside of a dryer. I kept remembering the certainty that I was going off the cliff. I kept hearing myself cry out. I kept seeing my mom and my cat in my mind. The whole thing had taken maybe a few seconds, but it felt like it had created a permanent mark inside me. I also remember the loneliness of that moment. There is something uniquely terrifying about crashing alone. If someone else had been in the car, maybe we would have screamed together. Maybe we would have looked at each other afterward and confirmed that we were still alive. But I was alone. There was no one to say, "Are you okay?" No one to tell me what had happened from the outside. No one to make it feel real in a shared way. It was just me, the car, the mountain, and the darkness. That road had already been intimidating before the crash, but after the car stopped, it felt almost alive. The curves, the drop, the mountain wall, the darkness, All of it seemed to be waiting, like the road had tried to take me and then changed its mind at the last second. I know that is not rational. Roads do not decide things. Mountains do not choose whether people live or die. But after an accident like that, your mind starts giving personality to everything around you because it needs someone or something to blame. The mountain, the road, the dark, the curve, fate, God, anything, and yet, somehow, I was still there. I was not drunk. I was not high. I was not doing anything wild. I was just driving in the early morning darkness, and suddenly, I was inside one of the scariest moments of my life. That is part of what makes it so unsettling. We like to think danger gives us warning, but it does not always. One moment you are just trying to get somewhere, and the next moment you are saying goodbye to everyone you love inside your head because your car is rolling and you think you are about to fly off a mountain. The Nissan Cube, of all cars, had somehow protected me enough to leave me alive. I never looked at that little boxy car the same way again. Before that, it was just my car. After that, it was the weird little vehicle that rolled into the side of a mountain and still landed upright like it had one last trick to show me. I do not know if it was luck, physics, divine rejection, or some combination of all three, but I survived. Not gracefully, not calmly, not with any heroic action on my part. I survived while screaming for Jesus and holding the wheel like a driving school poster. The thing that stayed with me most was not just the impact. It was that feeling of acceptance. For one horrible second, I really did accept that I was going to die. I was not ready, but I accepted it because I thought I had no choice. That is a feeling you do not forget. It changes the way you understand fear. There is panic, and then there is the moment beyond panic when your brain says, this is happening, and there is no way out. I reached that point. Then, somehow, there was a way out anyway. Afterward, when I tried to tell the story, I realized how absurd parts of it sounded. A Nissan Cube rolling into a mountain, me peeking with one eye and feeling like I was inside a dryer, me saying goodbye to my cat and my mom, me yelling, Jesus, here I cometh, like I was in some chaotic, low-budget historical drama, then surviving and sitting there like God had personally denied my entrance. It sounds almost funny when you say it out loud, but it was terrifying. That is the strange thing about some real scary stories. They can sound funny afterward, because the human brain uses humor to survive them. If I do not make jokes about it, I have to sit with the fact that I truly thought I was going to die alone on the side of a mountain in the dark. I have to remember the sound of the crash, the way the world spun, the certainty that the cliff was coming, and the helplessness of being inside a car that was no longer under my control. Humor makes it easier to hold. Still, even with the jokes, I know how serious it was. I know how lucky I was. A slightly different angle, a little more speed, another roll, a different landing, and I might not be here telling the story. The car could have gone over the edge. Another vehicle could have come around the curve and hit me. I could have been thrown around worse inside the car. The outcome could have been completely different in a dozen ways. Instead, I landed upright, alive, and somehow still holding the steering wheel properly. That part still makes me laugh and shake my head. 10 and 2. Of all things. My body really said, we may be rolling into a mountain, but we are going to maintain safe hand placement. There is something so stupidly human about that. In a moment where I had no control at all, my hands clung to the one thing they understood, the steering wheel, as if holding it correctly could convince the universe I deserved another chance. Maybe it worked. Or maybe Jesus really did look at me and say, Not today. All I know is that one early morning, on a dark, winding road along the side of a mountain, I rolled my Nissan Cube and thought I was going to die. I saw the world spin like I was trapped inside a dryer. I said goodbye to my cat and my mom. I accepted my fate. I called out to Jesus like I was already on my way. And then, instead of death, I found myself sitting upright in the middle of the road, alone in the dark, in shock, gripping the wheel, alive, rejected by God, maybe, saved by luck, maybe. Either way, I was still there. When I was 17, my girlfriend and I fell asleep at my house one night without really meaning to. We had probably been watching something, talking, or just hanging out like teenagers do, and at some point we both drifted off. It was not planned, and it was not one of those deep, restful sleeps either. It was the kind of sleep where you wake up feeling confused because you did not mean to fall asleep in the first place. When we woke up, it was around 2 in the morning. The house was quiet, and everything had that strange middle-of-the-night feeling to it. Nothing feels completely normal at that hour. The air feels heavier. The rooms seem darker than usual. Even familiar places feel a little different when you wake up suddenly and realize the whole world outside has gone still. My girlfriend needed to get home, so I got myself together enough to drive her back. I was still half asleep, still trying to fully wake up, but at 17 you do things like that without thinking too much about it. It did not feel like a big deal at the time. It was just a quick drive there and back. I remember getting into the car and starting down the road with that tired, foggy feeling still hanging over me. My body was awake enough to drive, but my mind was not fully there yet. You know that feeling when you wake up in the middle of the night and everything seems a little dreamlike? That was how I felt. The roads were dark and mostly empty. There were no normal daytime sounds, no traffic, no people out walking their dogs, no kids riding bikes, no neighbors moving around, just the headlights of my car cutting through the darkness and the quiet road stretching ahead. I drove my girlfriend home without anything strange happening. I dropped her off, made sure she got inside, and then turned around to head back to my house. That was when the night started to feel different. I was alone now, and the tiredness felt stronger. The drive back was quiet, in a way that started to make me more aware of everything around me. The hum of the car, the road under the tires, the way the headlights lit up the pavement and then swallowed it again behind me. It was the kind of lonely drive where your mind starts filling in the silence. On the way back, I had to cross a bridge on a 2-lane road. The bridge was fairly new at the time. It had been built to replace an older, smaller bridge that used to be there before. The old bridge had a bad reputation in the area. It was not just old and narrow. It had this weird turn right before it, the kind of turn that could catch people off guard, especially at night or in bad weather. From what I knew, there had been a lot of bad accidents there over the years. People who knew the road understood that spot was dangerous. You had to be careful coming up on it because the curve and the bridge were a bad combination. The new bridge was better, at least in the normal sense. It was newer, wider, and safer than the one it replaced. But even after the old bridge was gone, the area still felt strange to me. Maybe it was because I knew the history of the place. Maybe it was because people had been hurt or killed there. Some places seem to hold on to things even after they are changed. A new bridge can cover the old structure, and new pavement can smooth out the road, but it does not always erase the feeling that something happened there. At least, that is how I remember it feeling. As I approached the bridge from a distance, my headlights reached far enough ahead that I could start to see the road and the shape of the bridge coming up. I was still groggy from waking up in the middle of the night, so at first I was not fully focused on every little thing. I was driving like anyone would at that hour, just trying to get home safely and get back to bed. But then I saw something ahead. At first, it looked like a person. More specifically, it looked like a woman wearing a red dress. She was near the bridge, and even from a distance, that red stood out against everything else. The road was dark, the trees and surroundings were dark, the sky was black, and then there was this shape that looked like a woman in red. It caught my attention immediately, because it did not make sense. It was 2 in the morning. We were on a 2-lane road near a bridge, not in some busy area where people would be out walking around. There were no houses right beside the bridge, no stores open, no reason I could think of for a woman to be walking there at that time. My first thought was confusion more than fear. I remember thinking, why is somebody walking out here right now? It was late, cold looking in that dark roadway, and empty. The sight of her did not fit the scene. It was not like seeing someone walking down a sidewalk in town. This was a quiet road, and she was just there, near a place that already had a bad history. Even half asleep, I knew it was strange. As I got closer, I tried to understand what I was seeing. My headlights should have made it easier, but somehow I never got a clear look at her. That is one of the parts that still bothers me. If there was really a woman standing or walking there, I feel like I should have been able to see more. I should have been able to see her face, her hair, the way she moved, something. But as I drove by, it happened too fast, and the angle was wrong. Or maybe I was too tired. Or maybe she was not fully there in the way a normal person would be. I saw enough to think woman, red dress, but not enough to understand anything else. I passed her, and almost immediately I looked into my rearview mirror. That was when the fear started to rise. I expected to see her behind me. That would have made sense. If I had just passed a woman walking near the bridge, she should still have been there. The red dress should have shown up in the mirror, even if only for a moment. My headlights were in front of me now, but there should have been enough darkness and distance behind me to see some shape, some movement, something on the side of the road. But I did not see her. She was gone. I kept looking back through the mirror, trying to figure out what had just happened. At first, my brain tried to make normal excuses. Maybe I had not seen her right. Maybe it was a sign, or a mailbox, or some object on the side of the road that only looked like a person because I was tired. Maybe the red dress was just a reflection or something hanging there. But none of those explanations felt right. What I had seen looked like a lady. It looked like a person, clear enough that my mind immediately understood it that way. And then, when I looked back, there was nothing. That is when the whole road started to feel different. I was not just tired anymore. I was awake. Completely awake. My heart started beating faster, and that uncomfortable feeling went through my chest and stomach. The feeling you get when your body realizes something is wrong before your mind can fully explain why. I kept my hands on the wheel and kept driving, but every part of me wanted to look behind me again. I checked the mirror once, then again, then again. Each time, there was nothing there. The bridge disappeared behind me, but the feeling did not leave. I swear, with God as my witness, for the rest of the drive home, I kept thinking I was going to see that lady again. Every curve in the road felt like the place where she might appear. Every turn made me tense up. I kept expecting my headlights to catch the red dress again, standing at the side of the road or maybe in the middle of the lane. I kept thinking I would come around a bend and there she would be, somehow ahead of me, even though I had already passed her. That is a hard feeling to explain unless you have experienced it. It was not like normal fear where you know exactly what you are afraid of. It was worse because I did not understand what I had seen. My brain could not place it. If she was a real woman, where did she go? If she was not real, then what had I just passed? The not knowing made it feel like anything could happen next. The road suddenly seemed longer than it had ever seemed before. Every dark patch felt deeper. Every tree line looked like it could be hiding something. The whole drive became one long wait for her to show up again. I tried to stay calm, but I could not stop thinking about the old bridge. I knew people had been killed there. I knew there had been bad accidents at that exact spot before the new bridge was built. That old bridge had not just been an ordinary piece of road. It had taken lives. Maybe that was why the sight of the woman in red felt so wrong. It was not just that she was there at 2 a.m. It was that she was there near a place connected with death, near a road that already carried stories and memories of people who never made it home. I kept driving, but I was watching the road in a way I had never watched it before. My eyes moved from the lane ahead to the shoulder, then to the mirror, then back to the road. I did not want to look too long behind me because I was afraid I would crash, but I also did not want to stop looking because I was afraid she would be there. It felt like I had brought something with me by noticing her. That sounds strange, but that was the feeling. Like once I had seen her, she was part of the drive now. Like the moment I passed the bridge, I had crossed through something I was not supposed to understand. The red dress kept replaying in my mind. It was such a strong detail. If she had been wearing dark clothes, maybe I could have convinced myself it was just a shadow. If she had been wearing something normal and plain, maybe I could have written it off as a person walking late at night. But the red dress stood out too much. It felt too specific, too strange. A woman in a red dress near a bridge in the middle of the night is not something you see every day. It is the kind of image that feels like it belongs in a warning, or a story someone tells you long after it happened. I thought about turning around, but there was no way I was going back. Even if part of me wanted to prove to myself that I had seen something ordinary, a much stronger part of me wanted to get home as fast as I safely could. Turning around would have meant going back to the bridge, back to the place where she had vanished, and I wanted nothing to do with that. I was 17, tired, alone, and scared in a way I did not want to admit out loud. The only thing I wanted was to see my house, pull into the driveway, and get inside. The rest of the drive felt longer than it should have. Roads I knew well started feeling unfamiliar. I kept checking each turn, each stretch of shoulder, each dark area beyond my headlights. I expected her to be standing there, waiting. I pictured her appearing ahead of me without walking, without running, just somehow there again. I pictured passing her a second time and then looking in the mirror and seeing nothing again. I pictured looking in the mirror and finally seeing her in the back seat, even though I knew that was ridiculous. Fear does that to you. Once it gets inside your head, it starts making every possibility feel real. By the time I got home, I was shaken. I do not remember every little thing I did after pulling in, but I remember the feeling of relief. The house looked normal, safe, familiar. I was away from the bridge. I was away from that empty road. I was away from whatever I had seen. But even inside, I could not fully shake it off. The image stayed with me. The woman in red, the bridge, the mirror, the empty road behind me. I tried to explain it to myself, and I still have tried over the years. Maybe it was a real person and I just missed her in the mirror. Maybe she stepped off the road or moved behind something. Maybe because I was still half asleep, my mind filled in details that were not there. Maybe it was an optical illusion caused by headlights and shadows. Those are the reasonable answers, and I know people will always reach for them first. But none of those answers feel right to me. I know what I saw. I saw what looked like a lady in a red dress, near that bridge in the middle of the night. I drove past her, looked back, and she was gone. And I know that a few people had been killed on the old bridge that used to be there. Maybe that does not prove anything to anyone else, but it matters to me. It makes the whole thing feel connected, like the place had not fully let go of what happened there. My guess is that it was a ghost. I do not say that lightly. I am not claiming I understand ghosts or how any of that works. I do not know if it was the spirit of someone who died on that old bridge, or some kind of memory left behind, or something else entirely. I only know that the experience felt different from seeing a random person walking at night. It had a weight to it. It had that cold, unreal feeling that makes your body react before your brain has time to think. What scares me most is not just that I saw her, it is that she disappeared so quickly. If I had seen her in the mirror, if she had simply kept walking, maybe the whole thing would have become a weird memory and nothing more. I might have told myself she was just someone out late for some reason I did not understand. But the fact that she was gone when I looked back is what changed everything. That is the part that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. I also think about how I kept expecting her at every turn. That feeling did not come from nowhere. It was like some part of me knew I had seen something that did not belong to the normal world. I was not just afraid of the dark. I was afraid of seeing her again because something about her felt unfinished. Like she was tied to that road, that bridge, or those accidents. Like she was not just walking somewhere, but appearing there for a reason. Maybe she had died there. Maybe she had been connected to one of the accidents. Maybe she was just passing through in a way I will never understand. Or maybe the place itself held onto the shape of someone's last moments, and I happened to drive through at the wrong time, tired enough and quiet enough to see it. I do not know. What I do know is that I never forgot it. Even now, when I think back to being 17 and driving home at 2 in the morning, I can still picture the road. I can still feel that half-awake fog before I saw her. I can still see the bridge coming up in the headlights. I can still see the red dress standing out in the darkness. And I can still feel that sharp rush of fear when I looked in the rearview mirror and saw nothing there. Some things happen so fast that they should fade from memory, but they do not. They stay because they leave a mark. That night left one on me. It taught me that familiar roads can become unfamiliar in a second. It taught me that places with bad histories can still feel alive in some strange way. And it taught me that sometimes you do not need a long encounter or a clear face or a loud noise for something to scare you. Sometimes all it takes is a woman in a red dress near an old accident spot, appearing for one moment and then vanishing before you can understand what you saw. I made it home that night, but I did not feel like I had just taken a normal drive. I felt like I had passed through something. I had crossed that bridge, seen someone or something waiting near it, and then carried the fear of her all the way home. I still do not know how to explain it, but if you ask me what I think it was, I think that lady on the bridge was not alive. In high school, I used to go out to cemeteries at night with my friends and just hang around like idiots, trying to scare ourselves and act creepy. I know that probably sounds disrespectful now, and looking back, it was not the smartest or most mature thing to do. But at that age, we did not think about things too deeply. We were teenagers, bored, restless, and always looking for something to make the night feel more exciting than it really was. We lived in the kind of area where there was not much to do late at night, so we made our own entertainment. Sometimes that meant driving down back roads, sitting in parking lots, sneaking around old places. or going somewhere quiet and dark just because it gave us a thrill. Cemeteries were one of those places. We were not there to damage anything or mess with graves. We did not go around breaking stones or doing anything like that. Mostly, we just liked the feeling of being somewhere we were not supposed to be after dark. There was something about walking between old headstones at midnight that made every sound feel bigger and every shadow seem like it might move. We would talk, joke, dare each other to walk farther into the dark, and then laugh when someone got scared. Most of the time, nothing happened. The scariest part was usually our own imaginations. After a while, we had a few cemeteries that became our usual spots. Some were close to town, but those were never as good because there were houses nearby or streetlights in the distance. The best ones, at least to us back then, were the rural cemeteries far out on dirt roads. Those places had a different feeling. No houses for miles, no traffic, no porch lights, no people walking dogs. Just open fields, tree lines, gravel and dirt roads, and a patch of old graves sitting in the dark like it had been forgotten by the rest of the world. One night, around midnight, I had my car loaded with 6 friends. It was packed, loud, and exactly the kind of messy teenage situation you would expect. Everyone was talking over each other. Somebody was probably making jokes in the back seat. Someone else was probably trying to scare everybody before we even got there. I was driving, and we decided to go to one of our usual cemeteries. It was one of the rural ones, the kind that sat out in the middle of nowhere with no homes nearby. To get there, you had to take quiet roads that got darker and emptier the farther you went. The drive out there already felt creepy in that fun way. The headlights were the only real light in front of us, cutting through the dust and darkness. The road was dirt, and every bump made the car shift and rattle. Outside the windows, there was nothing but dark fields and trees. Every now and then, the headlights would catch a fence post or a mailbox, but mostly it was just black space on both sides. When you are in a car full of friends, it is easy to feel safe. You can laugh at the darkness because you are not alone. But even with everyone there, the farther we got from town, the quieter some people became. When we finally reached the cemetery, I pulled in and parked near the fence. It was not a big place, but in the dark it felt larger than it probably was. The headstones were scattered across the ground, some upright, some older and leaning a little, their shapes barely visible in the dim light. The fence around it looked like a thin border between our side and something else. Beyond the cemetery were woods, and those woods were completely black. There was no moonlight strong enough to make them look friendly. They were just a solid wall of darkness past the graves. We sat in the car for a moment with the headlights still on. Everybody looked around, making comments, acting brave. Then, like we usually did, we got out. Doors opened one by one, and the quiet outside swallowed the noise from inside the car. It is always strange how loud a group can feel in a small car. And then as soon as you step outside into open darkness, your voices suddenly sound smaller. The air felt cool, and the night had that rural silence that is never truly silent. There were bugs, maybe some distant animal sounds, the soft crunch of dirt and gravel under our shoes, but no human noise at all. Then we turned off the car lights. That always changed everything. With the headlights off, the cemetery became much darker. Our eyes had to adjust, and for a few seconds, we could hardly see anything. The shapes of the headstones became darker shapes against the ground. The trees beyond the cemetery blended together. The sky had a little light, but not enough to make us feel comfortable. Everyone stayed close to the car at first, still joking, but quieter now. There is a certain point where joking in a place like that stops feeling like joking and starts feeling like you are trying to cover up how nervous you are. We were standing around outside the car when one of my buddies suddenly said, "Hey, what's that light?" At first, I did not know what he meant. I thought maybe he saw a reflection from the car, or maybe some distant light through the trees. But then he pointed toward one of the graves, and we all looked in that direction. Sure enough, there was a small blue light over by a grave. It was about the size of a baseball, maybe a little smaller, and it had this soft glow to it. It was not bright like a flashlight, and it was not wide like a beam. It was just a little round blue light sitting there in the darkness near the ground. For a second, nobody said much. We all stared at it, trying to understand what we were seeing. It was not moving at first. It was just there, glowing softly near one of the headstones. Because we were teenagers and did not want to admit we were already creeped out, I immediately tried to explain it away. I said it was probably one of those little solar lantern things people put by graves. You see them sometimes in cemeteries, small lights that charge during the day and glow at night. That made sense. It was the easiest answer, and everybody wanted that to be the answer. A few people quickly agreed with me. Yeah, that's probably what it is. You could hear the relief in it. Nobody wanted to say out loud that the light looked strange. Nobody wanted to be the first person to admit that something about it did not seem right. It was easier to accept the normal explanation and move on. A solar light near a grave was creepy only because of where we were, but it was not impossible. It was a thing people actually used. So we all stood there telling ourselves that was what it had to be. But even while I was saying it, I was not completely convinced. The color was weird. It was a clear blue, not the usual weak white or yellowish glow I would expect from a cheap cemetery lantern. It looked too clean, too round, and somehow too separate from the ground. I could not see any base under it. I could not see a stake, a plastic lantern, or anything holding it in place. It just looked like a small ball of blue light near the grave. Still, I held on to the solar lantern idea because it was better than any other idea. We started moving closer to the fence. We were not inside the cemetery yet, just hanging around outside the car and slowly walking up like we were trying to prove we were not scared. Everyone was watching the light now. The joking had mostly stopped. There were still a few nervous comments, but the mood had changed. A minute before, we had been a group of teenagers goofing off in a cemetery. Now we were all focused on one small blue glow by a grave. Then, the light moved. It did not flicker out. It did not fall over. It did not swing like something hanging from a hook. It floated upward. Slowly, the little blue light rose from near the grave until it was about head height. When that happened, every normal explanation in my head started to fall apart. A solar lantern does not do that. A reflection does not lift itself off the ground. A flashlight beam does not turn into a little ball and rise into the air. We all saw it at the same time, and for a moment, no one reacted. We were too busy trying to understand what we were looking at. It hovered there, around the height of a person's head, still glowing that soft blue color. It was silent, completely silent. There was no buzzing sound, no drone motor, no footsteps, no voices, no wind strong enough to carry anything. It just floated. I remember that silence more than anything. If it had made a noise, maybe it would have felt more normal. If we had heard a person laugh, or an animal run through the brush, or even a mechanical hum, our brains could have grabbed onto that. But there was nothing. Then, the light began moving away from the grave. It moved slowly, drifting toward the woods beyond the cemetery. It was not jerky or fast. It did not bounce like someone carrying a flashlight while walking. It did not swing side to side. It glided. That is the only way I can describe it. It moved like it had no weight. like it was just floating through the air with a purpose we could not understand. The whole group stood there, watching it, and I think every single one of us was waiting for someone else to say something first. By then, the cemetery did not feel like a place we were using to scare ourselves anymore. It felt like a place that had answered back. The blue light kept drifting toward the tree line. It passed away from the graves and into the darker edge of the woods. The trees swallowed it little by little, and then it disappeared completely. It did not flash. It did not drop. It did not turn off like a normal light. It just faded into the woods until there was nothing left to see. For a second, nobody moved. Then two of my friends, either because they were braver than the rest of us, or because they did not want to admit they were scared, jumped the fence and went after it. I remember thinking they were insane. A few seconds earlier, we had all watched a blue light rise off the ground and float silently into the woods, and their first thought was to chase it. But that is how some people react to fear. They run toward it because running away would mean admitting it got to them. They climbed over the fence and headed in the direction where the light had gone. The rest of us stayed closer to the car and watched. I did not want to follow. Not even a little. My curiosity was there, but fear was stronger. There was no way I was going into those woods after a floating blue light in the middle of the night. The cemetery itself was creepy enough. The woods beyond it looked like pure darkness, and once that light vanished inside them, it felt like the darkness had taken it. The two friends who went after it did not find anything. They looked around for a short time, but the light was gone. There was no lantern, no person, no flashlight, no glowing objects stuck in a tree, nothing on the ground, nothing moving through the woods. It had disappeared as if it had never existed. They came back, and by then the rest of us were completely creeped out. No one was laughing anymore. That is how you know when a group of teenagers is genuinely scared. The jokes stop. The fake bravery disappears. Everyone starts talking in shorter sentences. People look over their shoulders. The mood shifts from "this is fun" to "we should leave." That was exactly what happened. We all started moving back toward the car at the same time, like nobody wanted to be the first to say it, but everybody had already agreed. We got in fast. Doors opened and slammed. People climbed over each other to get back into their seats. The inside of the car, which had felt crowded and annoying earlier, suddenly felt like the safest place in the world. I started the car, and when the headlights came on, the cemetery looked normal again in the beam of light. Just headstones, grass, fence, and trees. No blue light, no movement, nothing that could explain what we had just seen. But the normal look of it did not make me feel better. If anything, it made the whole thing feel worse, because now there was no proof. Nothing to point at. No object to show everyone and say, "See, that's what it was." The light was gone, and all we had was the fact that all of us had seen it. That was the only reason I did not immediately convince myself I had imagined it. If I had been alone, maybe I would have tried to explain it away as my eyes playing tricks on me. But I was not alone. My car was full of people, and we all saw the same thing. I drove away from that cemetery faster than I probably should have on a dirt road. Nobody complained. Nobody told me to slow down. Everyone wanted distance between us and that place. The headlights bounced over the road, the gravel and dirt kicked up behind us, and the cemetery disappeared into the darkness behind the car. I kept checking the rearview mirror, even though I did not want to. I half expected to see that blue light behind us, floating over the road or following at the edge of the trees. But there was nothing there. For a while, everyone talked at once. That always happens after something scary. People start repeating what they saw. asking if everyone else saw it too, trying to build a shared version of the event so it feels less insane. One person said it had to be a lantern. Someone else said lanterns do not float. Someone said maybe it was a flashlight. Someone else said there was no person there. The two who jumped the fence said they did not find anything at all. No light, no object, no one hiding, nothing. The more we talked about it, the less sense it made. A solar lantern was the first explanation, but that was dead the moment the light floated up to head height. A person with a flashlight did not fit either, because the light was too small and round, and it moved too smoothly. Also, if someone had been standing there, we should have seen them, or heard them. A reflection did not make sense because there were no headlights on after we turned the car lights off, and a reflection would not drift into the woods. A firefly or insect seemed impossible because it was too big and too steady. It was about the size of a baseball, bright enough that we all saw it clearly from where we were standing. The strangest part was how silent it was. I keep coming back to that. It made no sound at all. It did not buzz, crackle, flap, step, or rustle. Even when it moved into the woods, there was no branch snapping, no leaves moving, nothing. It was like a light without a source. Just a small, blue, glowing thing that rose from a grave and floated away. After that night, cemeteries did not feel the same to me. Before, they had been creepy in a fun way. They were places where we went to make ourselves nervous, but deep down, we believed nothing would really happen. That night changed it. It made the fear feel less like a game. There is a big difference between pretending a place is haunted and seeing something you cannot explain with 6 other people standing beside you. I do not know what that light was. I still do not. Maybe there is some scientific explanation I have never heard. Maybe there are weird natural lights that can appear in certain places, or maybe it was some rare thing caused by gases, reflections, or electricity. I am open to that possibility. I am not saying I know for sure that it was a ghost or anything like that, but I also know what it looked like, and I know how it moved. I know it started by a grave. I know it rose into the air. I know it floated away into the woods. I know my friends saw it too. And I know that when 2 of them went after it, they found nothing. That is what makes the memory stay with me. It was not a shadow seen for half a second. It was not one person getting scared and convincing everyone else. We all saw it together. We all watched it move. We all felt the mood change at the exact same time. And when it vanished, it left behind that awful empty feeling, the kind that makes you realize you are standing in the dark, far from any houses, next to a cemetery, with no good explanation for what just happened. Looking back now, I think about how foolish we were to be out there at all. Not because of the dead, but because of everything else. We were teenagers in the middle of nowhere at midnight, walking around a rural cemetery with no one nearby. Anything could have happened. A real person could have been hiding there. We could have gotten hurt. The car could have broken down. There were a lot of normal dangers we never took seriously. But what we saw that night was not one of those normal dangers. It was something stranger, quieter, and harder to explain. I can still picture that blue light clearly. Small, round, and glowing near the grave. I can still hear my buddy asking what it was. I can still remember myself saying it was probably a solar lantern, because that was the answer I wanted to believe. I can still see it lifting off the ground and rising to about head height, slow and silent. I can still see it drifting away from us, moving into the woods like it knew exactly where it was going. And I can still feel the moment when all of us realized we were done pretending to be brave. We got back in the car and left because there was nothing else to do. Whatever that blue light was, it did not want to be found. It showed itself just long enough for all of us to see it. Then it floated away into the trees and disappeared. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was some strange natural thing. Maybe it was connected to the grave where we first saw it. Maybe it was something we were never meant to understand. All I know is that 7 high school kids went to a rural cemetery that night to scare themselves for fun. And for once, the cemetery gave us a real reason to be scared. Forgive me for stepping in for just a moment. If you've only recently found your way here, then welcome. I'm glad you came. If these stories are keeping you company tonight, consider subscribing to Crowain Manor. New stories arrive here often, the kind that stay with you long after the night is over. And if you tap the bell, you won't have to go looking. The next one will find you on its own. Thank you for being here. Now, let's return to where we left off. I was lying there in bed when, all of a sudden, the air in the room changed. That is still the best way I can describe it, even though it does not fully explain what it felt like. It was not like a normal cold draft coming through a window, and it was not like the room simply got quiet. It felt like the air itself became heavy. 1 second, I was just lying there, calm and half relaxed, and the next second, everything around me felt thick, pressed down, and wrong. It was as if the room had been normal a moment before, and then something invisible had stepped into it and brought a pressure with it. I know that sounds strange, and I know it is hard to picture if you have never felt anything like it. But the feeling was physical. It was not just an emotion or a random thought. It felt like the space above and around me had changed. The air had a weight to it, almost like the pressure before a storm, but more focused and more personal. It was not outside. It was in my room. It was right there with me. I could feel it on my skin, in my chest, and somewhere deep in my stomach. It made me feel uncomfortable before I even understood why. Then I felt a chill. It did not feel like normal cold either. It was not the kind of cold where you pull the blanket up higher and go back to sleep. It went through me in a way that felt sharp and unnatural. The temperatures seemed to drop around me, but more than that, there was this strange negative feeling that came with it. I can only describe it as a bad aura, even though I do not usually talk like that. I am not someone who normally believes in energies, ghosts, spirits, or anything like that. I do not go around blaming weird things on the paranormal. But in that moment, the feeling in the room was so wrong that I do not know what other words to use. It felt negative, heavy, hostile, maybe, but not in a loud or obvious way. More like the room was suddenly filled with something that should not have been there, something that did not belong. I remember feeling that before I saw anything. My body reacted first. It was like some ancient part of my brain understood danger before my regular thoughts could catch up. I had not heard a noise. I had not seen movement yet. Nothing had touched me. But the feeling alone was strong enough to make my eyes shoot open. I opened my eyes fast, the way you do when you wake up because something is wrong. For a split second, I was still trying to understand where I was. I was in my bedroom, in my bed, in the dark. Everything should have been familiar. My ceiling should have looked the way it always did. The shadows should have been normal shadows, the kind your eyes adjust to after a while. But I looked straight above me, and what I saw was not normal. There was a black mass above me. It was not just a shadow on the ceiling. That is one of the first things I tried to tell myself later, because a shadow would make more sense. A shadow can be explained. A A shadow can come from a light outside, a car passing by, a tree branch moving, a piece of clothing in the corner, or your eyes playing tricks in the dark. But this did not look like that. It looked like something hanging or moving above me, something dark and thick, darker than the rest of the room. It had a shape, but not a clear one. It was like a mass of blackness, shifting and rippling in place. The best word I can think of is undulating. It moved in this slow, uneven way, almost like it was breathing or flowing. It was not solid like an object, but it was not flat like a shadow either. It had depth to it. It looked like a piece of darkness that had somehow gathered itself together above my bed. It did not have eyes or a face or arms or anything like that. I did not see a person. I did not see a ghostly figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was just this moving black mass above me, and that somehow made it worse. If it had looked like a person, maybe my brain could have tried to understand it as a nightmare or a hallucination. But this was stranger than that. I stared at it for maybe 1 or 2 seconds. That does not sound like a long time, but in the moment, it felt long enough. It was long enough for my brain to register what I was seeing. It was long enough for my body to understand that something was above me. It was long enough for the chill, the heavy air, and the sight of that black shape to all come together into one terrifying feeling. I did not have time to study it or make sense of it. I only had enough time to realize that I wanted to get away from it immediately. There was no slow buildup after that. There was no decision-making process. I did not lie there wondering if I should turn on a light or call out. I did not try to be brave. I did not reach for my phone. I did not blink a few times to see if it would disappear. The part of my brain that thinks calmly and logically was completely overruled by the older, more animal part of my brain. The part that only knows danger and survival. The part that says, move now. That part of my brain told me to get out. So I did. I threw myself out of bed as fast as I could. I did not climb out normally. I did not sit up slowly. I threw myself away from whatever was above me. It was messy and panicked. My body moved before I fully planned the movement. The blanket tangled around me for a second, and I remember the sudden rush of motion, the shock of leaving the bed, and the cold air hitting me differently as I moved. I did not stand up and walk. I crawled away as fast as possible. Like getting low and moving quickly was the only thing that mattered. Looking back, that reaction is one of the reasons I know it was not sleep paralysis. I have read about sleep paralysis. I know people can wake up, unable to move and see terrifying things in their rooms. I know they can feel pressure, fear, and sometimes see dark figures or shapes. But that was not what happened to me. I was not frozen. I was able to move instantly. I moved so fast that I basically launched myself out of bed. Whatever this was, it did not trap me in place. It scared me so badly that I physically escaped. I crawled across the room toward the bedroom door. I was not thinking clearly. I was not thinking about how stupid I might look or whether I was overreacting. I was not even thinking about what the thing was. My only thought was distance. I needed distance between me and the bed, between me and that black mass, between me and the space where the air had gone heavy and wrong. The floor felt hard under my hands and knees, and the door felt farther away than usual, even though it was not. Fear has a way of stretching a room. It makes every few feet feel like a mile. By the time I reached the bedroom door, I had enough control over myself to stop for a second. Not calm control, more like the kind of control you get after the first blast of panic, when your brain starts trying to catch up with your body. I was at the door, away from the bed, and for some reason I decided I had to look back. I think part of me needed to know if it was still there. Another part of me probably wanted to prove to myself that I had imagined it. Maybe I expected to turn around and see a jacket hanging weirdly, or a shadow from the window, or some normal thing that my half-asleep brain had turned into a monster. I wanted an explanation. I wanted the room to make sense again, even though I was terrified. I still had that rational part of me trying to fight its way back in. It wanted evidence. It wanted to look again and understand. So I turned around. There was nothing there. Nothing. The space above my bed was empty. The ceiling looked normal. The shadows looked normal. The room looked like my room again. Whatever I had seen was gone. The black mass was gone. The movement was gone. That thick, undulating darkness was no longer above the bed. It had not drifted into a corner. It had not moved across the ceiling. It had not stayed there long enough for me to examine it. It was simply gone, as if it had never been there at all. That should have made me feel better, but it did not. In some ways, it made the whole thing worse. If there had been something ordinary there, I could have calmed down. If I had seen a shadow and figured out where it came from, I could have laughed at myself. If I had looked back and seen that it was just clothes on a chair or something on the wall, I could have explained the entire thing away. But there was nothing, no explanation waiting for me, no object, no trick of light that made sense, just my empty bed and the room sitting there like nothing had happened. I stood there trying to understand it, but there was nothing to understand. The strangest part is that I do not believe in the paranormal. I have never been the kind of person who hears a creak in the house and thinks ghost. I do not usually believe in spirits, hauntings, demons, or anything like that. If someone told me this story, I would probably try to come up with logical explanations for them. I would ask if they were half asleep. I would ask if there were car lights outside. I would ask if they had been stressed, sick, or dreaming. I would try to explain it, because that is what I do. I like normal answers. I like things that make sense. That is why this experience bothers me so much, because I cannot make it make sense. I have gone over it in my head more times than I can count. I have tried to tell myself it was a dream. Maybe I had been dreaming and opened my eyes while part of the dream was still hanging around in my brain. Maybe I was in that strange place between sleep and waking, where the mind can create images that feel real. Maybe my brain produced some kind of hallucination for a second or two. I know that can happen. I know the mind is capable of strange things, especially at night, especially when someone is tired. But even if that is the explanation, it does not change how real it felt. The heavy air felt real. The chill felt real. The negative feeling in the room felt real. The black mass above me looked real enough that my body reacted like it was a physical danger. I did not calmly observe it like a weird dream image. I reacted like something was in the room with me. And the fear was not the kind of fear you feel while watching a scary movie or imagining something in the dark. It was immediate, deep, and instinctive. It felt like my body knew I needed to get away before my mind even knew why. That is the part I keep coming back to. The feeling came before the sight. The room changed before I opened my eyes. If it had only been the black mass, I could maybe say my eyes adjusted weirdly, or I saw a sleep-related image. But the air itself felt different first. The pressure, the chill, that dark, negative feeling. It all arrived before I looked up. It was almost like something announced itself without making a sound. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like the kind of thing people say when they want to make a story scarier. But I am not trying to make it sound like anything. I am trying to describe something that is very hard to put into words. The entire experience lasted only a few seconds, but it left me with a memory that has stayed clear. I remember the heaviness, I remember my eyes opening. I remember the shape above me. I remember the way it moved. I remember throwing myself out of bed. I remember crawling toward the door. I remember turning around and seeing nothing. And I remember feeling completely unable to explain it. I have thought about sleep paralysis again and again, but it does not fit for me. I was able to move, not just a little. I moved violently and immediately. I threw myself out of bed and crawled away. My body worked fine. My arms and legs worked. I was not trapped under that thing. I was not lying there helpless. Whatever happened, it was not the classic kind of sleep paralysis where you wake up and cannot move while something terrifying appears in the room. I have also thought about ordinary shadows. But I do not know what shadow could have moved like that above me and then vanished completely by the time I reached the door. There was no obvious source. Nothing had fallen. Nothing was swinging. Nothing was hanging above me. No one else was in the room. There was no reasonable thing I could point to and say, that was it. And because there was no explanation, the memory has never fully settled in my mind. It has stayed open, unfinished, like a question I cannot answer. Maybe it really was just my brain. Maybe for 1 or 2 seconds, my mind created something out of stress, tiredness, darkness, and the strange border between sleeping and waking. Maybe the heavy air and chill were part of the same false experience. Maybe my body reacted to a nightmare I barely remembered, and my eyes turned the dark ceiling into something moving. That is probably the answer that makes the most sense. I can admit that. But saying that does not make me feel certain. Because when I was there in that room looking up at it, it did not feel imaginary. It felt like something was above me. It felt like something had entered the space over my bed. It felt like the room had become occupied by a presence that was not supposed to be there. The fear it caused in me was too strong and too instant to forget. Even now, when I think about it, I can still feel a small echo of that same chill. I also remember the silence. There was no loud crash, no whisper, no footsteps, no voice. That almost made it worse. The whole thing happened without sound. The room became heavy. I looked up, saw the black moving shape, and then I ran. It was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that feels like pressure, like the room is holding its breath, like everything is waiting for something to happen. I do not know what would have happened if I had stayed in bed and kept staring at it. Maybe nothing. Maybe it would have vanished on its own. Maybe my brain would have fully woken up and corrected itself. Or maybe the fear would have gotten worse. I will never know, because there was no way I was going to stay there and find out. My body made that choice for me. It saw something it did not understand, and it got me out. Afterward, I felt embarrassed, even though no one had seen me. There is something strange about being terrified by something you cannot prove. You feel ridiculous, but the fear was still real. You want to explain it to someone, but the words sound weak compared to the experience. I saw a black mass above my bed sound simple, almost silly, like something from a cheap horror movie. But living through it felt nothing like a movie. It felt deeply wrong. It felt personal. It felt like the room itself had turned against me for a moment. That is why I have trouble telling the story. I am not the greatest storyteller, and even if I were, I do not think I could fully describe what I saw and felt. Some experiences do not translate well into words. You can describe the facts, but you cannot give someone the exact feeling in your body. You cannot make them feel the sudden weight in the air, the cold moving through you, the shock of opening your eyes and seeing darkness moving above you. You cannot fully explain why 1 or 2 seconds can stay with you for years. But that is what happened. I was lying in bed. The air went heavy. A chill came over me. The room felt negative and wrong. I opened my eyes and saw an undulating black mass above me. I stared at it for only a second or two before pure instinct took over. I threw myself out of bed and crawled away as fast as I could. When I reached the bedroom door and turned back to look, it was gone. There was nothing there. I still do not believe in ghosts. I still try to explain things logically. I still think it had to be some strange image created by my own brain, something imaginary that felt real because I was waking up. But I swear, when it happened, it felt completely real. The sight, the chill, the pressure in the air, all of it felt real. And that is the part that still scares me. Because whether it was something outside of me or something created inside my own mind, for those few seconds, I was absolutely sure that I was not alone in that room. I was swimming and cliff jumping with some friends when they took me to this crazy quarry jump that I had never been to before. I had done a few jumps before, but I was never the kind of person who truly enjoyed them. Some people get a rush from standing on the edge of something high and throwing themselves into the water below. They laugh, they yell, they climb back up and do it again like it is nothing. I was never like that. I liked swimming. I liked hanging out with my friends. I liked being outside on a hot day with the water below us and everyone joking around. But cliff jumping itself had always made me nervous. There was something about standing at the edge and looking down that made my stomach feel like it had dropped before I had even jumped. The place they took me to was an old quarry, the kind of spot people in the area seem to know about, even if it is not exactly a safe or official swimming place. It had that hidden, risky feeling to it. The water was dark and still in some spots, bright where the sun hit it, and surrounded by rock walls that made everything feel bigger and deeper than it probably looked from far away. When you are standing near water like that, especially in a quarry, it is hard to know how deep it really is. The surface can look calm and harmless, but underneath, anything could be there. Rocks, ledges, old debris, tree limbs, who knows? Still, people jumped there all the time, and my friends acted like it was just another fun place to spend the day. When we first got there, everyone was excited. They were pointing out the jump, telling me how high it was, laughing about how wild it felt on the way down. I remember looking up toward the top and seeing this small wooden platform built near the edge. I do not know who had put it there or how long it had been there, but it did not look like something I would have trusted if I had really stopped and thought about it. It was damp, mossy, and slick. The kind of slick that does not just make you slip a little, but can take your feet right out from under you before you even know what happened. It looked like the exact kind of place where you would want a lot of traction, and it was the exact opposite of that. The wood was dark from moisture, and there was green moss around it, clinging to the edges and making it look even more dangerous. You could tell the platform had been used a lot, but that did not make me feel better. If anything, it made me think about how many wet feet had stepped on it, how many people had rushed toward the edge, how many times someone could have almost slipped and just never told anybody. It was not some clean diving board at a pool. It was a damp wooden platform over a quarry, with rocks around it and deep water below. Everything about it should have made me say no right away. And honestly, I wanted to say no. I was the most scared one in the group, and everybody knew it. My friends were not being cruel, but they were definitely pushing me. They kept telling me I had to do it. They were saying things like it was not that bad, that everyone else had already done jumps like this, that I would regret it if I did not try. You know how friends can be when they are trying to convince you to do something risky. Half of it is encouragement. Half of it is pressure. And all of it gets louder when you are already nervous. They were laughing, calling me chicken, telling me not to think too much, telling me to just go for it. I stood there trying to act like I was not as scared as I was. I did not want to look weak in front of everyone. I did not want to be the only person who backed out. At the same time, every part of me was aware of how high it was and how wrong that platform felt under my feet. It was slick enough that I was careful with every step. I remember thinking that the scary part might not even be the jump itself. The scary part might be slipping before I was ready and falling wrong. When you jump on purpose, at least you can try to control your body. But if your feet slide out from under you on a wet platform, you might go sideways, backward, or hit the rock on the way down. I looked over the edge and tried to see what was below. From where I was standing, I could see the base of the rock I would be jumping from, and I looked into the water as best as I could. I did not see any rocks under the surface, except the rock wall itself. The landing area looked open. The water looked deep enough. Other people had done it, so I told myself it had to be fine. That is one of the things that tricks you in moments like that. You see other people do something and survive, and your brain starts treating it like proof that it is safe. But really, it only proves that those people got lucky or landed in the right place. I kept hesitating. My friends kept pushing. The longer I waited, the worse it got. The fear had time to grow. My legs felt tight. My hands felt weird. My chest felt heavy. I could hear everyone below and around me, but their voices felt a little distant. Part of me wanted to climb back down and say I was not doing it. Another part of me did not want to deal with the teasing. I was caught between common sense and pride was slowly winning. Finally, I said to myself, screw it. I decided to jump. That moment right before jumping is strange. You can think about it for 10 minutes, but the actual choice happens in half a second. 1 second you are standing there on solid ground, or at least something close to solid ground, and the next second your body is moving forward and there is no way to take it back. I remember stepping off that platform and immediately feeling the air take over. The ground was gone. The platform was gone. My friends were gone from my mind. There was only open space under me and water far below. I still remember that fall clearly to this day. It did not feel like a normal jump. It felt like jumping from a plane. I know that sounds dramatic, but that is exactly how it felt in the moment. I was in the air so long that my brain had time to go through different stages of fear. At first, there was a weird rush, almost like disbelief. I was actually doing it. I had really jumped. For a split second, I even giggled because the feeling was so unreal. It was like my body did not know what else to do with all that panic and adrenaline. The fall was long enough that I had time to laugh, and that alone tells you how high it felt. Then the falling feeling really hit me. It was not fun anymore. It was not a little jump. It was not something I could pretend was no big deal. I suddenly became fully aware that I was dropping fast, and the water was coming up hard. My stomach shot upward, my chest tightened, and the laugh disappeared. That deep falling feeling took over, the kind that makes your whole body scream that something is wrong. I remember yelling, "Oh shit," because that was all I could get out. There was no time to think of anything better. It just came out of me. I took a deep breath right before I hit. I wish I could say I had perfect form, but I did not. I was too shocked to ball up or prepare the way I should have. People who jump from heights know how important body position is. You have to be careful. You cannot just hit the water any random way and expect it to feel soft. Water can hurt when you hit it from high enough. It can feel like concrete if you land wrong. But in that moment, I was not calm enough to think through all of that. I was falling too fast, too scared, and too surprised by how long I had been in the air. Then I hit the water. Boom! The impact was violent. My knees slapped into my chest because I had not tucked or controlled my body right before hitting. It felt like my whole body folded in on itself for a second. The water swallowed me, cold and hard, and everything went loud and silent at the same time. There was the crash of the impact, then the muffled pressure of being underwater. For a moment, I was just trying to figure out which way was up. My body was shocked. My chest hurt. My legs hurt. Everything felt stunned. But somehow, I had gone into the water clean. That was the part I did not understand at the time. I had hit hard, but I did not hit a rock. I did not land sideways. I did not slam into the base of the quarry wall. I went straight into open water. Once I realized I was underwater and still able to move, instinct took over. I kicked, pushed upward, and broke through the surface. I took in air and started swimming out. My friends were probably cheering or laughing or asking if I was okay, but I mostly remember the huge rush of relief that came over me once I knew I had survived the jump. At the time, I thought that was the whole story. I was scared, I jumped, I hit the water hard, and I swam out. That was it. It felt like one of those stupid things you do when you are younger and then talk about later like it was just a crazy memory. I was shaken, but also proud in that dumb way you feel after doing something that scared you. My friends had convinced me. I had done it, and I had lived. I probably laughed it off after I got out of the water. I probably acted like it was not as bad as it felt. That is what people do when they are embarrassed by how scared they were. But the next day changed how I remembered it. I happened to be visiting my grandmother's house. It was just a normal visit, nothing dramatic. I was not thinking about the quarry in any serious way. The jump was still fresh in my mind, but more like a wild story than anything else. I was at her house, probably relaxing, when I saw a news report playing on her TV. At first, I was not paying full attention. Then I realized what they were talking about. Someone had been killed at that exact same jump. The same quarry. The same spot. The same jump I had done the day before. The person had jumped and hit a rock. They did not just get hurt. They were killed. From what the report said, they hit the rock so badly that they were basically splattered. I know that is a horrible way to say it, but that is what made it stick in my head. It was not a twisted ankle or a broken arm or someone needing stitches. It was death. Real death. The kind of death that makes everyone suddenly treat a place differently, even though the danger had been there the whole time. I just sat there, watching the report, and this cold feeling went through me. Only then did I understand what had almost happened. The day before, when I stood on that slick wooden platform and looked down, I thought I had checked the water. I thought I had seen enough. I did not see any rocks under the surface except the base of the rock I was jumping from. I looked before I jumped. I really did. But that did not mean the water was safe. It did not mean there were no hidden rocks. It did not mean I understood the landing area. It did not mean I knew what I was doing. That is what scared me the most. I had survived without even knowing how much danger I had been in. When something dangerous happens, and you know it is dangerous in the moment, your fear makes sense. You can react to it. You can tell yourself you escaped. You can understand why you are shaken. But this was different. I had walked away thinking the scariest part was the height, the fall, and the impact with the water. I thought my fear was about being high up and having to jump. I did not know that I may have been only a few feet, or maybe even inches, away from hitting something that could have killed me instantly. The thought kept replaying in my head. What if I had jumped a little farther to one side? What if my feet had slipped on the mossy platform and changed my angle? What if I had hesitated and stepped wrong? What if I had rotated in the air? What if I had landed closer to the rock wall? What if the water had pushed me a certain way? What if I had done almost the same thing, but just slightly different? That is the kind of fear that stays with you, because it is not loud at first. It grows after the fact. You realize that the whole time you were laughing with your friends and trying not to look scared, something deadly was sitting right there under the surface. You could not see it, but it was there. It had been there when I jumped. It had been there when I hit the water. It had been there when I swam out and acted like everything was fine. I think about how strange survival can be. Sometimes people survive because they make a smart choice. Sometimes they survive because they see danger coming and avoid it. But sometimes you survive because you accidentally do every little thing right without knowing there were rules you were supposed to follow. You step in the right place. You jump at the right angle. You land in the one safe spot. You take a breath at the right second. You swim out, and only later do you find out that the same action killed someone else. That is a very different kind of scary. It is not like seeing a monster or hearing a strange noise in the dark. It is worse in a more realistic way. It is the fear of realizing the world is full of dangers you do not always recognize when you are standing right in front of them. It is the fear of knowing that confidence from other people does not make something safe. A group of friends saying, "Come on, you'll be fine," does not mean you will be fine. A place being popular does not mean it is safe. Seeing someone else do it first does not mean you will land where they landed. After seeing that news report, the memory of the jump changed forever. I no longer remembered it as just a crazy fall or a brave moment. I remembered the slick platform. I remembered the moss. I remembered how little traction there was. I remembered how long I was in the air. I remembered laughing for that one strange second, then screaming when the fear hit. I remembered the way my knees slammed into my chest and how lucky I was that the water under me was clear. And I remembered that someone else stood at that same place and did not come back out. I never saw those rocks when I looked down. That part still bothers me. Maybe the water was dark enough to hide them. Maybe the angle from above made them impossible to see. Maybe they were just outside the spot where I landed. Maybe the person who died jumped at a slightly different angle, or slipped or was pushed by momentum in a way I was not. I do not know. That is what makes it worse. There is no clear answer that lets me feel like I was safe, and they just made a mistake. I cannot tell myself that. I do not know what happened. All I know is that I jumped from the same spot and lived, and someone else jumped from that same spot and died. I also think about how easily that news report could have been about me. My grandmother could have turned on the TV and seen my name instead. My friends could have been the ones standing there in shock. My family could have been the one getting the call. That thought is hard to sit with, because nothing about the day felt that serious when it was happening. It felt risky, yes, but in the normal way, young people think things are risky. It felt like the kind of thing that would scare me and then become a story. I did not understand that it could have become the last thing I ever did. That experience changed the way I think about pressure, too. I do not blame my friends like they meant harm, because they did not. They were just being friends in that careless way people can be when they are having fun. But I do think about how dangerous it is when everyone treats fear like weakness. Sometimes fear is not weakness. Sometimes fear is your brain noticing something your pride is trying to ignore. Sometimes the person who says no is not being a coward. Sometimes they are the only person in the group thinking clearly. I wish I had trusted that feeling more. I wish I had looked at that damp, mossy platform and said no without caring what anyone thought. I wish I had understood that not wanting to jump did not make me weak. It meant I did not feel safe, and that should have been enough. But at the time, I let the pressure get to me. I let the teasing and the excitement push me into doing something I did not really want to do. And I got lucky. That is the only reason I can tell the story now. I got lucky. I jumped from the right place, or landed in the right spot, or entered the water at the right angle. I did not know what I was avoiding. I did not know that a hidden rock could have ended everything. I just happened to do enough right to survive. That is what scares me more than the jump itself. Not the height, not the fall, not even the impact. It is the realization that I had been standing on the edge of something deadly and did not truly understand it until the next day. Surviving something is scary in its own way when you only find out later how close you were to not surviving at all. In the moment, you think you were brave. Later, you realize you were lucky. And luck is not something you can count on twice. My friend and I went for a late-night drive one night just to clear our heads. We were young, and we were both under a lot of stress because we were about to move out for the first time. That might not sound like a huge thing to some people, but when you are at that point in life, it feels massive. You are standing right on the edge of being an adult, trying to act excited, trying to act ready. But deep down, you are nervous about everything. Money, bills, responsibility, living away from home, not knowing if you are actually prepared for any of it. It all piles up in your head. Back then, gas was cheap enough that you could just get in the car and drive for an hour without thinking too much about it. That used to be one of the best ways to decompress. You did not need a destination. You did not need a plan. You just needed the road, some music, maybe a friend in the passenger seat, and enough darkness around you to make it feel like the world had quieted down for a little while. So that night, around midnight, that is what we decided to do. We were going to drive down a very well-known park road. For anyone who lives in Michigan, it was Hines Park. It was not some random road in the middle of nowhere that nobody knew about. It was familiar. People drove it, walked near it, spent time there, and used it as part of normal life. During the day, it was the kind of place that could feel peaceful. Trees, open areas, winding roads, places where families and runners and people out for a drive would pass through. But at midnight, any park road can feel different. The same trees that look nice during the day become walls of shadow. The same curves that feel scenic in daylight feel like they are leading you deeper into something. Still, we had no real reason to be afraid. We were just two friends going for a drive to get away from our stress for a while. I do not remember us talking about anything scary before we got there. I do not remember either of us trying to spook the other or telling ghost stories. It was not that kind of night. We were not looking for fear. We were looking for relief. But as soon as we started pulling onto the road, something changed. Both of us got a really bad feeling at the same time. It is hard to explain that kind of feeling to someone who has never had it. It was not a normal nervous thought like, this road is dark, or maybe we should not be out this late. It was deeper than that. It was physical. My body did not want to go down that road. Every part of me suddenly said no. Not maybe. Not be careful. Just no. It felt like a warning, sharp and immediate, like some instinct had woken up and grabbed me by the chest. I looked at my friend, and I could tell they felt it too. That was what made it so strange. If it had only been me, maybe I would have kept quiet and tried to ignore it. Maybe I would have thought I was just anxious because of the move, or tired, or letting the darkness get to me. But it was both of us. We both felt that same sudden dread right as we were about to enter the road. It was like the car itself had reached an invisible line, and something in us knew we should not cross it. We decided to turn around. There was no debate, no long conversation. No one had to convince the other. We just knew we did not want to go down that road. We turned the car around and left. At the time, I do not think we fully understood why. We probably tried to laugh it off or call it a weird vibe. Maybe we told ourselves we were being stupid. Maybe we picked another route or just drove somewhere else. But I remember the feeling clearly. It was not casual. It was not just discomfort. It was the strongest instinct to leave that I can remember having. That week, a girl my friend went to school with went missing. At first, like most missing person situations, there was confusion. People were asking questions, sharing concern, hoping she would be found safe. When someone goes missing, especially someone connected even loosely to people you know, it changes the atmosphere around everything. Suddenly, the places you pass every day do not feel as normal. Roads, parks, parking lots, neighborhoods, all of them start to feel like they might be holding some terrible secret. A few weeks later, her body was found in that park. The same park. Hines Park. When we found out, I thought back to that night immediately. I thought about us pulling toward that road at midnight. I thought about the sudden feeling that slammed into both of us. I thought about the way we turned around without needing to explain it. And then I thought about her. A girl my friend had gone to school with. A real person. Someone who had been alive in the same world we were driving through. And then she was gone. Found in the place we had almost entered. That is the kind of realization that does not leave you easily. Because once you connect those two things in your mind, you cannot unconnect them. Maybe the feeling we had was just coincidence. Maybe it had nothing to do with her. Maybe we were anxious about moving out, driving late at night, and the park simply felt creepy because it was dark. Maybe if we had gone down that road, nothing would have happened. Maybe we would have driven through, talked, listened to music, and gone home with no idea anything terrible would later be found there. But maybe not. That is the part that stays with me. Maybe we could have done something to stop it. That thought hurts in a very specific way. It is not logical, because we did not know anything at the time. We did not know she was missing yet. We did not know where she was. We did not know that the park would become connected to her death. All we had was a bad feeling, and bad feelings are not instructions. They do not come with maps or explanations. They just tell you to leave. But still, after the fact, my mind goes back and asks the same questions. What if we had driven down that road? Would we have seen something? Would we have passed a car? Would we have noticed someone? Would we have been able to call someone? Would anything have changed? Or maybe we would have joined her. That is the darker possibility, and it is the one I do not like thinking about. Maybe that bad feeling was not telling us we could help. Maybe it was warning us that we were about to drive into danger ourselves. Maybe something was happening there that night. Or someone was there who should not have been. Maybe if we had continued down that road, we would have seen something we were not supposed to see. Maybe whoever was involved would have noticed us. Maybe the instinct that told us to turn around was the thing that kept us alive. I do not know. And not knowing is what makes it so haunting. People like clean stories. They like causes and effects. They like being able to say, this happened because of that, or we were warned, or we were saved. But real life does not always give you that kind of certainty. Sometimes all you have is a moment where your entire body tells you not to go somewhere, and later, something terrible is connected to that place. You are left with questions that cannot be answered. Was it intuition? Coincidence? Fear? Luck? Something else? I still remember the feeling in the car more than anything else. The quiet. before we turned onto the road. The dark mouth of the park ahead of us. The way the road seemed to invite us in and warn us away at the same time. The sudden heaviness in my chest. The way my friend felt it, too. The almost immediate decision to turn around. It all happened fast, but it became one of those memories that feels slowed down when you look back on it. At the time, we were just trying to distress. That is what makes it even stranger. We were not out looking for trouble. We were not trying to explore somewhere creepy. We were not chasing a scary experience. We were simply young, overwhelmed, and wanting to drive for a while because driving was cheap and easy and gave us the illusion of freedom. We were about to move out for the first time, and maybe we wanted one more night where we could be in between things. Not at home, but not fully in adult life yet either. Instead, we drove toward a place that would soon be tied to someone's death. I think about my friend, too. It was someone they went to school with. That makes the whole thing more personal. It was not just a name in the news or a stranger from somewhere far away. There was a connection, even if not a close one. Someone from their world had gone missing. Someone from their school was later found in that park. I can only imagine how strange it felt for them to remember that we had almost gone there at midnight and turned back because of a feeling we could not explain. I have tried to tell myself that we did the only thing we could do. We listened to the warning. Whatever it was, whether it came from instinct, anxiety, or something beyond either of those, we listened. We turned around. We went away from the road. Maybe that was the right choice. Maybe the only choice. But guilt does not always care about reason. It still whispers. What if? What if we had gone in? What if we had seen her? What if we had seen the person who hurt her? What if our headlights had caught something in the trees or on the side of the road? What if we had been too late? What if we had been next? Those questions do not have answers, and maybe it is better that they do not. There are some things you can spend your whole life trying to solve and still never know. All I know is that every part of me that night was telling me not to drive down that road. It was not a mild feeling. It was not just being creeped out. It was a warning that felt stronger than thought. And because my friend felt it too, I know it was not only in my head. Sometimes people survive things they never even understand they were close to. Maybe that is what happened to us. Maybe we drove up to the edge of something terrible and turned around before we could see it. Maybe the road was empty, and the feeling meant nothing. Maybe the tragedy happened later, and our fear had no connection to it at all. I cannot prove otherwise. But when a girl connected to my friend went missing that same week and was later found in that same park, the memory became impossible to shake. I still think about that night as one of those moments when intuition felt louder than logic. Logic said it was just a road, a known road, a park road people used all the time. Logic said we were already out driving, so why not continue? Logic said turning around because of a bad feeling was silly. But instinct said no. And instinct won. I am grateful we listened. I am also haunted by the possibility that listening meant we missed the chance to help someone. Those two feelings sit together, and I do not think they will ever separate completely. Relief and guilt. Fear and gratitude. The knowledge that we may have avoided danger, and the question of whether someone else could have been saved if we had not. That is the hardest part of the memory. Not the dark road itself, but the uncertainty attached to it. That night, my friend and I set out on a late-night drive to clear our heads before moving out for the first time. Around midnight, we started to pull onto Hines Park Road in Michigan, and both of us were hit with a terrible feeling that told us not to go any farther. We turned around. That same week, a girl my friend went to school with went missing. A few weeks later, her body was found in that park. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe we could have done something. Maybe we would have joined her. I do not know. But every part of me that night was screaming not to drive down that road, and after what happened, I have never forgotten what that felt like. We lost my dad twice. The first time was to Alzheimer's, and the second time was when his body finally gave up and he passed away. He did not die until March of 2023, but for me and for everyone who really knew him, the part of him that made him Dad left this world on the morning of Thanksgiving in 2020. That is hard to explain to someone who has never watched a person slowly disappear while they are still breathing. Alzheimer's does not take someone all at once. It steals little pieces over time. At first, it is small things, a forgotten word, a confused look, a question repeated more than once, a familiar place that suddenly feels strange to them. Then, little by little, it becomes bigger. Memories fade. Habits change. Their face is still there. Their voice is still there. Their hands are still the same hands you have known your whole life, but the person behind those eyes starts drifting farther and farther away. By 2020, my dad was already slipping away from us. Some days we could still catch little flashes of him. A certain smile, a look in his eyes, a reaction to something funny. A small piece of the man he had always been would come back for a moment, and we would hold on to it like it was gold. But those moments were becoming fewer. Most of the time, it felt like he was somewhere behind a fog we could not reach through. We loved him, of course. We still cared for him, still spoke to him, still tried to comfort him, still treated him with the dignity he deserved. But deep down, there was always that heavy sadness of knowing that the dad we remembered was already partly gone. Then, Thanksgiving morning came in 2020. It was already a strange and heavy time because we all had COVID. That alone made everything feel unreal. The house had that sick, quiet feeling that comes when everyone is exhausted, achy, and worn down. Thanksgiving did not feel like Thanksgiving. There was no normal warmth in the air, no easy holiday feeling, no loud family energy, no simple comfort. It felt like the whole world had gone quiet, and our little corner of it was no different. Everyone was tired. Everyone was sick. Everything felt slowed down and distant, like we were moving through a bad dream even before I went to sleep. I was sound asleep that morning when I had the dream. In the dream, I was standing with my dad at the most beautiful trailhead I had ever seen. It was not like any ordinary trailhead from a park or hiking area. It felt bigger than that, brighter than that, and somehow more real than real life. We were standing at the beginning of a trail, but the view in front of us stretched out in a way that did not make sense, and yet felt completely natural while I was there. I could see down into a valley, but at the same time, it felt like I was also looking upward toward the mountains. The whole place seemed to open in every direction at once. There were mountains in the distance, huge and peaceful, with soft light resting on their slopes. There were deep green woods, meadows that seemed to glow, and winding paths that disappeared around bends and over hills. I could see places the trail could lead to, even though they were far away. There were rocky overlooks where someone could stand and see for miles. There were waterfalls falling into bright pools and quiet grottos tucked away like secret places. There were lodges that looked warm and welcoming, campsites that seemed ready for tired travelers, and long stretches of forest where the trees stood tall and calm. Everything about it felt full of beauty and peace. It was the kind of place my dad would have loved. And in the dream, he was not sick. He was not confused. He was not old in the way Alzheimer's had made him old. He was young and healthy again. He looked strong. He looked like himself. Not just his body, not just his face, but himself. The real Dad. The Dad I remembered before the disease started taking him from us. He stood beside me with that familiar presence I had missed so much, like he had stepped out from behind all the illness and come back whole. He was wearing his old hiking gear from the 1990s, which made it feel even more like him. It was the kind of outfit that would have been embarrassing and perfect at the same time. Short shorts, thick socks, leather hiking boots, and a plaid shirt. The kind of clothes you could picture someone wearing in old family photos, standing at the edge of a trail with a grin on his face, ready to walk for miles like it was nothing. He had a massive pack on his back, too. The kind of pack that looked almost too big, but somehow suited him perfectly. Seeing him like that filled me with a kind of joy I cannot fully describe. It was not loud joy. It was not excitement. It was deeper and quieter than that. It was relief. It was like my heart recognized him before my mind could even catch up. For a while, Alzheimer's had made it feel like I was always searching for him inside the person in front of me. But in that dream, I did not have to search. He was right there, completely himself. Clear, strong, ready the trail was waiting in front of him. I remember knowing, in that strange way dreams give you knowledge without needing words, that this trail went somewhere important. It was not just a hike. It was not just a pretty place. It was a way forward. It led to all those beautiful places I could see, and maybe to places beyond what I could see. It felt endless, but not frightening. It felt like home, even though I had never been there before. Dad looked at me, and he asked, "Are you sure it's all right if I go?" That question broke something open in me, even in the dream. He was asking permission, but not in a helpless way. He was asking with love. He was asking because he was still Dad, and Dad would never want to leave without making sure we were okay. Even standing at the beginning of something so beautiful, with his pack ready and the trail waiting for him, he stopped. He stopped to ask me if it was all right. And of course, I said yes. I did not hesitate. I did not beg him to stay. I did not tell him we still needed him, even though we did. I did not try to pull him back toward us, even though some part of me probably wanted to. In the dream, I understood that he was not leaving us because he wanted to hurt us. He was going because it was time for him to go somewhere he could be whole again, somewhere he could walk freely, somewhere the sickness could not follow him. So I told him, "Yes, Dad, we'll see you when we get there. Love you." It felt like the most natural thing in the world to say. It felt true. Not goodbye forever, but goodbye for now. Not abandonment, not loss in the cruel way we think of loss, but a promise that there was a trail ahead and that one day, somehow, we would meet him there. He had gone ahead of us before in life, in so many small ways. Now he was doing it again, just on a path we could not follow yet. After I said it, he set off. He did not look scared. He did not look unsure. He turned toward the trail and began walking, strong and steady under that huge pack. I watched him go, wearing those ridiculous old hiking clothes, looking younger and healthier than he had in years. The sight of him walking away should have crushed me, but there was peace in it too. He was not trapped. He was not lost. He knew where he was going. Then I woke up. I woke up in tears, and I was absolutely convinced that my dad was dead. It was not the kind of dream where you wake up confused and slowly put the pieces together. I woke up already grieving. My whole body knew something had happened. I was crying before I could even fully understand where I was. The dream had been too clear, too sharp, too full of meaning. It did not feel like my brain had made it up out of stress or sickness. It felt like I had been allowed to stand somewhere between here and there for just a minute, long enough to say what needed to be said. For a few seconds, I lay there with that terrible certainty inside me. Dad was gone. He had come to say goodbye, and now he was gone. Then, almost immediately after I woke up, my mom started screaming. She was screaming that Dad was having a seizure. Everything changed in an instant. The peace of the dream was gone, and the real world rushed in hard and fast. I was sick with COVID, still shaken from what I had just seen, still crying, still trying to understand why I had woken up feeling like he had died. But there was no time to think. There was no time to sit with it. My mom was screaming, and Dad needed help. I got to him and did what I could. I managed CPR. Everything became urgent, panicked, and terrifying. The dream had been silent and beautiful, full of light and mountains and open air. This was the opposite. This was fear, noise, sickness, confusion, and the desperate need to keep his body alive. The two worlds felt like they had collided inside that morning. They got him to the hospital. They revived him. His body survived. But he was never the same after that. That is the part people sometimes do not understand. When I say we lost him that morning, I do not mean his heart stopped forever that day. It did not. He lived after that. He came back in the medical sense. He breathed. His body continued. The machines and the doctors and the emergency care did what they were supposed to do. They brought him back. But the dad who had stopped at that trailhead to ask if he could go never really came back with the rest of him. After that seizure, something was gone. Something final. Before that morning, even with Alzheimer's, there had still been traces of him. Small pieces, little sparks, brief moments where we could still see Dad inside the illness. But after that, it felt different. It felt like the last true part of him had already left. What remained was his body, his brainstem, and faint traces. Enough to keep him here, but not enough to make him fully him. And that is why I say we lost him twice. The second loss, in March of 2023, was the loss everyone understands. That was when his body finally passed away. That was when the world could officially call it death. There was a date, a final moment, a clear ending that people could recognize and respond to. People know what to say when someone dies. They say they are sorry. They send messages. They bring food. They offer comfort. They understand that a family is grieving. But the first loss, the one on Thanksgiving morning in 2020, was harder to explain. There was no funeral for that. No official announcement. No simple words for it. We still had him with us, and yet we did not. We were still caring for him, still loving him, still watching over him. But the father I knew had walked down that trail. For a long time, I thought about that dream again and again. I thought about the way he looked, young and healthy. I thought about that plaid shirt, those short shorts, those thick socks, those leather boots, and that huge pack on his back. I thought about the way the trail stretched out before him, full of woods and waterfalls and overlooks and quiet places to rest. I thought about the question he asked me. Are you sure it's all right if I go? That question still stays with me. It hurts, but it also comforts me. Because it means, at least in whatever way I believe it happened, he did not just vanish. He did not leave without love. He did not slip away alone in confusion. He stopped. He came to me. He asked. He gave me the chance to say yes, to tell him we loved him, to tell him we would see him when we got there. I do not pretend to understand how any of it works. I do not know what people believe, and I know everyone sees these things differently. Some people might say it was just a dream caused by stress, illness, grief, and fear. Maybe that is what they need to believe. But I know what it felt like. I know how I woke up. I know that seconds later, my mom was screaming that he was having a seizure. I know that after that morning, the last little bit of Dad was gone in a way I had not felt before. To me, that dream was not random. It was goodbye. It was my dad, the real him, stopping at the edge of whatever comes next before he went on ahead. It was him standing at the beginning of a beautiful trail, whole again, dressed exactly like himself, ready for the kind of journey he would have loved. It was him making sure we would be okay, because that is what he would do. Even while leaving, he was still thinking about us. The pain of losing someone to Alzheimer's is strange, because grief starts long before death. You grieve while they are still alive. You miss them while you are sitting beside them. You long for their voice while they are still making sounds. You look into their face and ache for the person who used to look back at you. Then, when they finally pass, it is not one clean grief. It is all the old grief rising again, mixed with relief that they are no longer trapped, mixed with guilt for feeling that relief, mixed with love that has nowhere to go. But when I remember that morning, I try to hold on to the beautiful part. I try to picture him on that trail. I picture him moving through those woods, past the meadows and the waterfalls, stopping at the overlooks, finding the lodges and campsites, walking strong and free. I picture him without the confusion, without the fear, without the broken pieces Alzheimer's left behind. I picture him as Dad again. And I am grateful. I am grateful that he stopped to say goodbye. I am grateful that for one last moment, I got to see him whole. I am grateful that when he asked if it was all right to go, I had the strength in that dream to let him. Because love is not always holding on. Sometimes love is standing at the trailhead, looking at someone you are not ready to lose, and telling them they can go because you know they are tired, and the path ahead is beautiful. We lost my dad twice. Once when Alzheimer's took him from us piece by piece, and once when his body finally passed in March 2023. But the morning of Thanksgiving 2020 is the day I believe his soul went home. Everything after that was his body staying behind for a while longer. The real Dad had already shouldered his pack, stepped onto the trail, and gone ahead.